right, guys. Thanks for jumping on another episode of Punch Me in the Face. And I'm really excited to have our guest today, Michelle Mace, which I think is really cool. Curran, am I pronouncing that correctly?
You nailed it.
Nailed it. Look at that. Okay. And I want to read this because I won't do a good job like trying to speak from memory because it's that important. So Michelle has led an impressive career as a fighter pilot during her 13 years in the Air Force. From 19 to 21, she flew as the only female pilot for the Air Force Thunderbirds and performed for millions across the country and internationally. Michelle was also named Distinguished Alumna of the Year of the University of St. Thomas in 21. She's been featured in several well-known media platforms, Kelly Clarkson Show, CBS Evening News, and Glamour. 4 year on the Thunderbirds, combat-proven fighter pilot completing missions across Europe, Asia, Middle East, has a passion for pushing her limits, obviously, inspiring others and changing lives. As the lead solo for the Thunderbirds, Michelle realized that flying was cool, but the best part was inspiring others to overcome their fears and pursue their dreams. Since transition out of the military, has founded her company, Upside Down Dreams, and written a children's book by the same name. Michelle is committed to empowering men and women of all ages to overcome obstacles and fear of failure. She's inspired thousands through her passion for breaking barriers, setting the example what can be accomplished through hard work. When Michelle isn't speaking, she volunteers as part of the Veterans Outdoor Advocacy Groups, spends time with her stepson and husband rock climbing, what a surprise, and pursues mountaineering goals. Michelle and her family enjoy their home in Las Vegas, hub of adventure. Number of things that are written on this page, Michelle, excite me. Okay. And I think that it's part of, first of all, I have to know, what is the lead solo for the Thunderbirds? Because I didn't know what that means.
Yeah. So for anyone listening that's seen the Thunderbirds fly, they saw 6 jets as part of the show. And when the jets are all in close formation together, they make, kind of a triangle shape, and that's called the delta. 2 of the aircraft in that formation, the far outrigger, so the far left and the far right wingmen, are solo pilots. And so we get to do some cool close formation flying in the delta, but we also have the job of showing the audience what the F-16 is capable of. So we will split off and do single aircraft maneuvers. We'll pull 9Gs. We'll fly inverted a lot of the time. We'll do max climbs from 100 feet above the ground to 15,000 feet in like 20 seconds. I think it's the most fun position on the team because you get to kind of experience all the realms of flight that the team does. We also do the head-on passes, which are like a high-speed game of chicken where the opposing solo and the lead solo fly at each other, and we pass about 50 feet apart, but keep in mind we're each going 500 miles an hour and we're pointed right at each other. So it's a fun position. It's stressful. You learn to deal with fear and being uncomfortable. And it gives the audience a lot of shock and awe. So it was a really fun position to fly.
All right. So I'll be really transparent. I like to do a lot of crazy things. Okay. I enjoy that. Right. And about 6 months ago, guy said to me, man, and I was looking at watching one of these shows, the formation, how it all works. And he's like, I know a guy and you should go up there with me. And I don't remember in my life where I've been like, I don't know if I want to do that. And I was like, yeah, man, sounds good. And I'm down. But part of me is like, dude, that's going to be quite like a ride. Michelle, when did you know growing up or through your life, you're like, I'd like to experience one of the biggest rushes probably known to man and women. When did you decide, hey, I want to join the military? And B, when I joined the military, man, I want to be a fighter pilot. I want to do something pretty unbelievable.
I think it's a little bit later than people expect. As a kid, I was very adventurous. I was climbing things. I loved roller coasters. I loved the rides at the fair where you just spun in circles until you felt like you're going to throw up. I got down with that since I was old enough to go on those rides. So I kind of knew I was a thrill seeker. But the military kind of came along because I honestly needed a way to pay for college. And there's some really incredible educational benefits. And my parents, brought it up and encouraged me to explore it. Once I looked into it, I saw all the opportunities that were there as far as traveling all over the world, doing some just really cool careers and operations. And I was from a small town in northern Wisconsin. So it was a way to just get out and explore the rest of the world. But at that time in high school, when I applied for the scholarship, I wanted to ultimately be an FBI agent. And so I went to college as a criminal justice major, planning on doing 4 years in the military to pay back the time from the scholarship, getting out and applying to the FBI. About halfway through college, we visited an Air Force base in Florida, and I got to see two F-15s, which are a jet that's bigger than the F-16 that I ended up flying, two engines. They were taking off at dusk in full afterburner. And I was on the side of the ramp, so I was very close. And that was kind of the first time I had really been up close to a fighter aircraft. And it was just a jaw-dropping experience for me. I got goosebumps. I was just kind of stunned, and I was like, wait a minute, forget the FBI. How do I go do that?
So you had that experience. You were still in college at the time?
Yes.
Okay. So when did you decide that, and you were in the Air Force, that's where you enlisted, right? That your 4 years, you decided to join the Air Force, but you
Yep.
didn't join the Air Force to be a fighter pilot. You just picked the Air Force.
Initially, yes.
Okay. So you picked the Air Force, you saw this experience. When did you decide? Because I would assume it's really competitive to do that. When did you decide I want to take that on? And what is that process? Like, how do you get selected? What do you have to go through? How do you actually get to hold one of those positions in the Air Force?
So it was kind of that day where it had been one of those things where people in ROTC while in college would be like, hey, who here wants to be a pilot? And people would raise their hands and I wouldn't, because raising my hand, comes with some accountability. Now people are watching to see if you follow through. I didn't want that. Once I saw those two jets take off, I was like, okay, I'm going to start raising my hand. And come the end of junior year, when we put our names in the hat to compete for a pilot slot, I'm going to do it. And I knew I was pretty competitive. I had a good GPA. I was doing well with the physical fitness stuff. And those are two of the things they really look at. And so I ended up getting one. And it's competitive, but not ridiculously so yet at that point. The further you get into the pilot training programs, the closer you get to fighter aircraft, the more the wickets tighten. And so, I go into pilot training with 0 civilian time, which was a lot of feeling like I was drinking from a fire hose. It's just so much to learn.
So most of the people that went in there had civilian time.
I would say the majority, not everyone, but a lot of people, had known they wanted to be pilots since they were younger.
Yeah.
They had started taking flying lessons. They had soloed when they were 16. And so
Got
they
it.
just already had basic concepts of airmanship, of how to talk on the radio, of how the procedures worked. All of that was new to me. So there was a steep learning curve where I was like, oh, maybe I'm in over my head here, but I rapidly caught up. And then my whole mentality through pilot training, which is a year-long program, and at the end of that, you find out what airframe you're going to go fly, usually for the rest of your career. And my mentality was fighter jets or bust. And I wouldn't say that's the best mindset, because classes at that time were about 25 people. Each class was getting anywhere between 1 to 3 fighter aircraft, and everyone else was ending up in, cargo, air refueling, other aircraft that all have cool missions, but was not what I wanted. And so
Got it.
you're committed to being in the Air Force for 10 years after you graduate pilot training, because they've spent a lot of money to train you. And so there was a very good possibility. The odds were in my favor that I would not get a fighter jet and I would end up flying something else for 10 years. So this was a big gamble. But I also think it was a big motivator for me. Like, I knew I wasn't okay settling. So I worked my butt off for that year, caught up to my classmates, ended up doing really well. And I got one of 2 fighter aircraft that were available for my class. I put F-16s first on my dream sheet, which is where you get to let your preferences be known. The Air Force takes that into consideration to some extent, but it's definitely not the end all be all. Turns out there's a lot of other factors. And I ended up getting them. So drop night is what we call it when you find out your airframe. And that was, I will never forget the moment when an F-16 came up on the screen behind me and my family was there and your whole class is there. It's just it's more exciting than graduation, is, and actually receiving your wings.
So you put that in dream. When did you ever think during the process? Because this whole thing's fascinating to me. Did you ever think that was a shot before you saw that picture on the screen? Like, did you think, man, I might have a shot? They might actually select me.
I did. Late in the course, I knew I was doing well. Like, you know how your graded rides are going each day. You know how your check rides, which are like your big evaluations, you have 4 of those throughout the course. You know how you do on them. You talk with your classmates, so you generally have an idea of how everyone is doing. And I knew there was one guy in our class that was clearly the top. He had just crushed every check ride, done amazing. I knew I was behind him, but it was between me and one other person for that second spot. And when there were only usually 2 or 3 fighter jets per class, I knew how important it was to be in that second spot versus that third spot.
Yeah.
And in our last check ride of the program, it ended up going really well for me, and he struggled a bit on that ride. And so I was pretty sure that that flight was the differentiation that moved me into the second spot, but
So your
you just
whole
never know.
career, your whole trajectory of your career could be contingent upon what happened in one day.
Absolutely.
That was not nerve-wracking for you ever?
Oh, I mean, it was. I just learned to deal with it. I would get very nervous before high stakes flights, especially check rides. I'd feel nauseous beforehand. There were people in my class that would throw up beforehand, not from air
Wait a minute,
sickness in
y'all
the
would throw
jet,
up.
but
You'd throw up beforehand, but not in the jet.
oh, right, right. Because it's the nerves. And honestly, what I found, I had flights where I struggled, where, you start to let your nerves get the best of you. You can feel the physiological reaction. You get dry mouth, your heart rate increases. You just can't focus like you normally can. I think other people have experienced that maybe when they're giving a presentation and they start to forget what they're talking about. That panic starts
Yeah.
to set in. It can totally derail the whole thing. But we also are really taught early on to compartmentalize and just accept that there's never a perfect flight. Things are going to go wrong. And you're just like, yep, that happened. We'll talk about it in the debrief. And you have to focus on the next thing and not let it snowball into the entire flight, or you're going to screw yourself over. And I just got pretty good at doing that. And that idea served me really well throughout my whole career. Just being like, well, that sucked. And then just kind of visualizing it, like leaving
Yeah.
out the back of the jet, leaving it behind, and be like, we'll deal with that later. What do I need to do right now so that this entire flight isn't lost?
So you flew in combat,
Yep.
right? You flew in different. Um, when you went in, did you ever know? I mean, do some people get in these planes and realize that they like don't enjoy it, get sick, get headaches, get screwed up, or is it just does your body just adjust to it? Does your body just eventually assimilate, or because that's a very different ride than 99.9% of
Yeah.
people ever experience?
It's a mix. Some people that go into pilot training thinking they want to fly fighter aircraft cannot overcome the air sickness enough to
Really?
go down that path. And so they might be fine in a heavy aircraft that doesn't go upside down, doesn't pull a lot of G's, and so they'll choose to go that path rather than pursuing a fighter. And occasionally people will wash out of the program because their air sickness is just so bad they can't do basic things. But some of the people that I admired the most in my pilot training class were those that had air sickness issues, and they would just push through. I mean, they're getting evaluated by instructor. They're learning all the same new things that I am, that I find challenging, and I'm not feeling sick. And they would take like 2 seconds, they'd throw up quick, and they would be back on the radio, still flying, still doing all the maneuvers. And it was just their level of grit was really impressive to me, because everyone knows how terrible it feels when you're sick.
Yeah.
And to operate at that level in that environment is tough.
So you just never got sick. Like to you, you
Mhm.
enjoyed this stuff growing up, you got in it, and it never affected you that way.
Yeah, I never had issues with the motion sickness. There was I guess the only time that I struggled with it a little bit, and I never threw up, but just started to feel that passive, like car sickness type feeling, was at the very end of my career when I was training my replacement for the Thunderbirds. And so those maneuvers that you're doing as a solo pilot are just so aggressive, and they're violent, some of them.
Yeah.
And it's okay when you're sitting up front and you're controlling it. But we have some 2-seater training models of jets, and I was in the back seat while he's trying to learn these maneuvers, and you're just bad at them when you first start. And so I'm like getting my helmet whacked against the canopy. We're rolling upside down to fly inverted, and he's like pushing too much. And then you experience negative G where all the blood rushes to your head. You're seeing stars. You're just like, this is not really fun. So that was the only point that I was like, oh, I could see why people throw up back here.
So in combat, what is one of the greatest things that you learned about yourself? Because that's obviously different than the maneuvers, right? I mean, now
Absolutely.
you're responsible for all kinds of people, I would assume. What is something that, first of all, what was one of the most, I don't know what you can share or not share, but one of the most intense experiences you went through? But also, what is something you learned about you as a person in that environment?
I think it ended up being a big confidence boost, but it was stressful at the time. you're stepping into something that everyone's talking about around you. You know, you go through all this spin up, all of this training months beforehand to get you ready for the specific mission. And for us going to Afghanistan, and the squadron I was in was full of very experienced pilots. A lot of them had deployed to that area many times. And so they're talking about it very casually, like, this is how it's going to be, this is what's going to happen. And then when you get there, it's all kind of surreal. And it's especially surreal the first time you get the radio call that you are cleared hot to drop live weapons off of your aircraft. And you've done it in training. And even in training, anytime you push that red button, which we call the pickle button, and an actual something is actually coming off your aircraft, whether it's just a training munition or it's actually armed, it's stressful because you know the repercussions of dropping that in the wrong place, of something going wrong, are much higher than other flights. And so the first time you do that in combat, you get a lot of temporal distortion. So you push the button and you like think that immediately the bomb should come off the aircraft, but it feels like an eternity. In reality, it's less than a second, but you like look at your finger on the button and you're like, oh no, something's not working. It's not coming off. And then you'll feel the bomb release. You'll hear it. And you're like, oh, okay, good. And then you have the next stress point of making sure it actually goes where you wanted it to go.
Where you're supposed to, yeah.
Yeah. And so everything is it's just very weird feeling the first time. There's one specific flight that sticks out for me. And those guys that were really experienced in my squadron, what I would say beforehand, they're like, look, when something important's going down, when we have friendly troops, like danger close, which means they're so close that they're actually at risk of getting hit by shrapnel from your weapon. So you're only dropping in that environment when they really need you to. It's like a serious target needs to be taken out. They're taking fire. It's time sensitive. So like, it's going to be danger close. Your wingman, because we would always fly with 2 jets to back each other up. A lot of our weapons deliveries were built on tactics using the 2 aircraft, like one releasing the weapon, the other one controlling it with a laser from the aircraft to guide it in. So we do a lot of teamwork. Your wingman will be gone at the tanker getting gas because the F-16 doesn't have a ton of fuel. So we would regularly air refuel, leave one jet on station while the other one got gas and then swap. And, you know, it's going to be at night. And I'm like, okay, sure. And I mean, that's pretty much exactly what happened for the only danger close drop that I did the entire time I was in Afghanistan was at night. My wingman, who was supposed to laze in the weapon, was at the tanker. And that's when we finally got clearance. And it was a really cool example of teamwork within the military and kind of trust and contracts, because I got cleared on the radio. They knew that my wingman was at the tanker, and we can guide the weapon in ourselves, but there's just a lot more chance for error in that setting when you're doing both of those roles. The odds that something's going to get messed up is a lot higher. And so I'm about to roll in and point down towards the ground. It's very dark there. So when you point at the ground, it feels like you're just pointing into this like black abyss. You get this sensation that you're about to hit the ground, even if you're at 10,000 feet. And I hear a voice over the radio that there was an Army UAV like thousands of feet above me who had the ability to guide my weapon in and had been listening to this whole scenario for probably hours, honestly. And they're like, hey, we can give you guidance. Like, we can provide laser guidance. And I'm like, cool. So I make sure we're on the same code, that we're good to go. And like within 30 seconds, I'm rolling in, releasing, they're guiding it in, and it shacked the target. And I've heard the tapes from that release, and my voice definitely went up an octave, and I was just like, confirm lasing, because it was a stressful environment. Trusting someone I had never met, never had a conversation with until, 20 seconds prior. I don't know what they look like. I don't know what rank they are. I know nothing about them besides that they're on Team USA essentially here, and that we all play by the same rules and we all go through similar training. And I'm trusting them, because if that had gone to the wrong spot, it wouldn't be their butt on the line. It would be mine, because it came off of my aircraft. And so it ended up working out great. And I think that situation really built my confidence in how we operate and in my own abilities. And I just think it's such a cool example of the teamwork that we worked with in that stressful environment.
So what do you mean, guide? So you drop, somebody else can guide the weapon. Somebody else can guide in what you dropped.
Yep, exactly. Because depending what the weapon is, they have various ways that they guide to their location, right? They can follow a laser, they can have a GPS
Wow.
tracker in them, all of that kind of stuff. And this one in particular was following a laser. And we have the ability on our aircraft using a targeting pod to fire the laser and to release the weapon
Uh,
and guide it in. But the particular attack that I was doing involved me diving towards the ground about 20 degrees or so, 20 to 30 degrees nose low. And so, like I said, you get that sensation with there's just no frame of reference. You can't see the ground, it's just all black. And so it's very hard to get in the right parameters, release the weapon, recover your aircraft, also keep your pod on the target, lays it in. It can be done, but it's a lot more preferable for someone that's just in a stable environment, flying level, to do that
yeah.
lasing for you. There's just a lot, it eliminates a lot of room for error.
So when do you, okay, so you drop that, it's danger close. So
Yeah.
your people on your team are really close.
Yes.
When do you know that like you, I guess I hate to say, when would you know if you didn't, like if it, when do you know it landed where it was supposed to land? How
Yes.
quickly do you know that?
As soon as it impacts. So we have the pods on our aircraft that are, I'm looking at the target, and my first priority is to start the jet climbing away from the ground. Once I'm in like a safe attitude, my next thing is I'm looking in the pod and waiting for the weapon to impact. And much like when you push the pickle button and it feels like forever for it to release, it really feels like forever when it has 15 seconds, 30 seconds of flight time, and you're just staring at
Yeah.
the pod being like, is it there yet, is it there yet? And then it's a IR pod, so you will get the big bloom. And most people have seen videos of targeting pods on YouTube or on the
Yeah.
news or
Yeah.
on various things, but it's very clear that it impacted. And so I knew it hit the right spot at that point, but then you're kind of waiting to see if it had the effects that you wanted. And yeah, it's a whole thing.
I'll tell you what, I've always, in my experience, as close I've gotten to this is watching a movie, right? But I've always, like, when they call these danger close, ordnance in, I always thought, I can only imagine how, number one, how stressful it is. Number two, what the repercussions are. Cause like you said, that means you're at a point where like you really have to have this no matter what, right? It's not a Hail Mary, but there's something going on that if we don't do this, lives will be lost, right? Right. You're in that position. And I can only imagine what men and women go through when things don't go, because things don't always go right. Right. I
Right.
mean, life happens. And I just, so I have probably, the utmost, I couldn't have any more respect for you and all the men and women that serve us. I couldn't have any more respect for y'all than I do. This has given me a very surreal perspective on that. So that means a lot to me, and I appreciate that. And I think everybody listening is, somebody asked me the other day, what do you do when you're having a bad day? And I said, well, what is a bad day? What's happening? And, a lot of my stuff is sales, entrepreneurship. You didn't get the loan you wanted. This happened, that happened.
Yep.
And I struggle with that being a bad day, and I even struggle with, I don't even know that I can ever have a bad day relative to what a lot of the service members go through and what y'all have been through. So thank you for that. And I think it gives us a perspective that we need in life. Uh, Talk to me about, what percentage of fighter pilots are female? I don't know the answer, but what percentage are?
Yeah, when I first came into the Air Force around 2009, 2010, it was about 2%, and now it's
Wow.
up to about 3. So,
Wow.
not many of us.
How was what is something you learned like going in? I mean, when you're only 2%, 98% of people are not your gender. I mean, there's got to
Yep,
be some apprehension, right?
totally.
And then you're probably in places where you're the only female. There's only so many of you anyway.
Yep.
How was that experience just from a female perspective? Like what did you, what was something that maybe surprised you in a good or bad way about it?
Yeah, so I think I've learned a lot about the effect that it had now after leaving and kind of reflecting on it. And what I'm doing now is a lot of storytelling and a lot of writing, and it's involved a lot of reflection on that time. Be like, why did I experience things from the lens that I did at that time? And one of the things I've really realized is, the people I worked with were incredible. We were such a high performing team, and they become your family, right? Like I did go to war with them. I would go to war with any of them. But the way that the environment was just culturally at the time, there were a lot of unintentional repercussions. And it's never a hit on one person. It's kind of just how things were. But I do realize that it did have a negative impact on me. And so I showed up to my, my first fighter squadron kind of on top of the world, right? Like I had worked my butt off. I got my first choice of jets. I was a brand new F-16 pilot. And I go to Misawa, Japan. And so that's about 8 hours drive north of Tokyo. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And most people there don't speak English. So your squadron mates are really everything, right? They're your friends, they're your family, they're the only people that you socialize with. And I show up to a new squadron where I have to learn a very complicated mission. And it was kind of an eye-opener for me as far as how complicated being a fighter pilot was beyond just flying the airplane. That part really becomes second nature. And the thing is operating all of the sensors, understanding the weapons, understanding enemy sensors and how everything works together. And it's complicated. And so I struggled with that at first. Reference, I was a criminal justice major. That was not really helpful in that environment. And so I had, I think, the normal level of stress, of doubt, of anxiety that comes with getting thrown into a high performance career where you feel like there's just a mountain of information to learn and you can't get your arms around it. But that evolved over my first 6 months in that squadron. That went from like the normal level of struggle to making me really struggle with what everyone calls now imposter syndrome, where I got to a point where it became almost debilitating because I felt like I was under a microscope. I felt like if I did well or did poorly, I was setting the reputation for all women that were going to follow my footsteps. Yeah. And I just never felt like I belonged there. And it's not like people purposely excluded me. It's just little things where every day you're reminded that this environment isn't built for you and you have to adapt to it to survive here. Everything from flight gear not fitting, flight suit zippers not being long enough to go to the bathroom in the aircraft, like not having a locker room to change in, emails or big squadron get-togethers, everyone being addressed as like, okay, gentlemen, or something like that. Do I really care about any individual one of those things? I'm not easily offended. I don't. But I look back and I realize how it did actually impact me because I did not feel like I could be my authentic self there. I felt like I had to play dress up and put on this facade and I had to prove myself. And so that led to me not connecting as deeply with people as I should have. It led to me hiding when I needed help, not asking questions when I should have. And I really sabotaged my own learning ability for quite a while because I felt like I had to put on this facade that I could do it all on my own or I didn't deserve to be there.
Well, it's a lot of weight to carry on your shoulders, you know, think about what people are coming after you. Upside down dreams. What is, tell us about that. What are you all doing?
Yeah. So just to make it as confusing as possible for people, I named my company Upside Down Dreams. And then I wrote a children's book and also named it Upside Down Dreams because because it's just a fun name and it's perfect for a kid's book about a little girl that wants to be a fighter pilot. Which if you're watching on video is sitting behind me right now. But the company itself, while flying for the Thunderbirds, I really kind of found this passion that I didn't quite realize I had. I knew it was there because it was one of the reasons I wanted to join the team. But I realized that is what I wanted to go do instead of flying high performance aircraft, which is hard for some people to understand because being a fighter pilot seems like such a dream job. But as my time on the Thunderbirds came to an end, I've been doing it for 13 years. It is very hard on your body. I was beat up. My priorities had shifted some and I felt like I had done what I set out to do. And I realized while flying for the Thunderbirds, especially because I was the only woman flying with the team for the whole 3 years I was there, that I was really in a unique position where I could connect with women and girls especially, and I could show them that there was more for them in the world than they imagined at that point, that I could show them that they could do hard things that seem unbelievably impossible. And it was doing that for people was by far the most rewarding part of that job. The flying was cool, but seeing a little girl's eyes light up when she realized that I had just stepped out of that jet that she just watched in awe for the last 45 minutes and that I looked like her and I had my hair braided like her, and like just seeing herself in that role, that's life-changing for a kid.
Yeah.
And I got to do that day in, day out, and it was so cool. So Upside Down Dreams was created so I could continue doing that. And the children's book is a way to still connect with kids, but the business is really primarily keynote speaking, corporate events, and not just women focused events. I've done stuff for thousands of people. I've done stuff in Peru, or not in Peru, in Brazil. So I'm going to Peru next year. In Brazil, in Canada, for men and women, lots of Fortune 500 companies. I felt very privileged to kind of step into the keynote speaking world and have it really take off quickly. And I think the reason that happened is because the stuff I've shared here in the interview so far is kind of the stuff I talk about on stage. You know, it's a little more polished with some end goals, but it's vulnerable, it's authentic, it's real, it's relatable. And people don't expect that from the Thunderbird pilot because they see the finished shiny product and it's almost got this mystique behind it. But I'm like, hey, I'm a person that struggled with self-doubt, that had fear, that dealt with feeling like I didn't belong, that did all these things, but found a way to get through it. And here's how you can too. And so Upside Down Dreams, both the book and the company, has been so rewarding, so much fun. And I honestly feel the most fulfilled and content professionally that I have ever in my entire adult life. And I know it's a shock to some people, but I don't miss flying the high performance aircraft. I really love what I'm doing now.
Well, you can tell you're very good at it. I love your message. I love the way you speak. I definitely love the vulnerability and the transparency. That's very empowering. And I think that in today's world, you know, Michelle, there's so many people that haven't run a number of companies and had people come in to speak. One of the things that I'm always trying to do is find a connection, right? Yeah. Will the people in there, will they believe? Will they believe more in themselves? Will they believe in you? Will they think you're shooting them straight? Do they believe that they can achieve and do the things? They don't need to go fly a F-16, right, but can they go ahead and face their fears? Because I love what you said about the grit. You know, everybody in life, in business, whatever, has times where they have their own motion sickness, figuratively, right? And there's something to be said for going, yep, I'm throwing up and I'm sick, but I'm going to continue to do this thing. And you bring a lot to the table. This has been really informative for me and actually really exciting because it's cool to hear from somebody. And also, I think it's been relatable because I think at times, you know, and I don't think anybody's like, I don't think people are like movie stars. I don't think they're just like not human beings. I don't think they didn't have fear. I think they did, you know, I think, and at the end of the day, I appreciate you sharing what you've done. I appreciate how you served the country. We definitely need to get you to come to one of our events and speak because you will be unbelievable. So, I mean, we'd love to have you. You know, I'm really glad to know you through Steve and to work with you. If people want to connect with you, Michelle, because they should, and follow you, connect with you, have you come speak at an event. We have a lot of men and women that watch, and a lot of them are, you know, from a business standpoint, independent entrepreneur, looking for some help, trying to figure out like when life, that was the whole concept. Steve, our mutual friend, right, Carlos 2MM, we started and he said, you know, talk to me about your message and you're this and you're that. And I'm like, dude, I don't even know what any of that stuff means. I'm just trying to help people change their lives. Yeah. And I said, humble and hungry. And he's like, that's stupid. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, it's dumb. Like, it's just dumb. Like with all the stuff you talk about, who you are, what your message is, it's not your message. I appreciate your humility. I think you're humble and I think you're hungry. I get it. He's like, punch me in the face. That's what it is. Punch me in the face. Because everything you're talking about is life's going to do this to you. You have to get back up professionally, personally. It's going to continue to knock you around. That's the way it works. So I think you're a perfect fit for what a lot of people that we follow us are talking about. How do they find you if they want to connect with you? How do they reach out to you? How does that work? And how could they bring you in to talk at one of their companies to help their folks understand some of the things you can teach?
Yeah, well, thank you for those all the kind words, and humility is really so important. And I've seen, you know, you meet very successful people like yourself, or I meet CEOs at these speaking events, and that's one of the things I've learned over the last year and a half is that I was surprised. I expected the mid-level person moving into a leadership role to come up to me afterwards and be like, I resonate with that. It was the leaders in the company that would come up and be like, that resonated with me. People expect me to have all the answers, and I am figuring it out as I go. And so I think it's so powerful. That's what everyone's doing. There is no, right, like you said, Hollywood, perfect, polished person that just has a roadmap. That doesn't exist. So once you realize that everyone's human, holy crap, so much is possible.
Amen.
But to find me, my website is Mace Curran, so my call sign and my last name. That's the best spot to see info on speaking, to get a hold of my team, all of that. As far as social media, Mace_Curran for Instagram, which I do have quite a few flying videos on there. If people want to see what my vantage point in the cockpit was like, you can definitely find that there. And then for a lot of the stuff we've talked about today, where, storytelling condensed into connecting it with lessons that people can learn from in their day-to-day lives, I write about 5 days a week on LinkedIn. And that's just been honestly where I get most of my speaking business from, because it really, the stories, the messages connect with people enough that they're reaching out and be like, how do we bring you out? And it's been super cool. It's been cathartic for me. I love doing it. But yeah, my name on LinkedIn is just Michelle Mace Curran. So any one of those 3 options is a great way to get a hold of me.
All right. So I got to know how Mace, why Mace? How do they figure that out? How do they pick those names?
Oh, well, this is a good question. So probably the most common question I get asked. So fighter pilot tradition, you are given your call sign once you get to your first combat squadron after you've had a few months to mess up a lot of things. So it's usually based on a mistake that you made, something dumb that you did. Occasionally it'll be a fun play off your last name, but it's never a compliment. It's always based on something dumb. And that's because they want to build humility, right? They want to be like, hey, we all made these mistakes. And it's kind of a badge of honor to earn. It's a rite of passage. But it usually has a negative connotation with it from the time the thing that inspired it happened. Another part of the tradition is that we only share the full story of our call sign in person.
Got it.
But I will give you the Cliff Notes version. I'll give you the teaser, but I do tell the full story very vividly in my speeches, in my keynotes, and the audience loves it. It's super fun. I went supersonic when I should not have. It was a tactical error on my part as a young, dumb pilot. I pulled a lot of G's, way more than I should have, and I nearly G-locked, which is going unconscious from G-forces, which can have very serious repercussions. Yeah. F-16 only has 1 pilot. So I will tell to my live audiences, I tell that story in great detail. They really understand how high stakes of a mistake that was, and kind of what the wake-up call that it was for me that sent me into this spiral of, holy shit, I'm in a serious business. Like, people die doing what I'm doing. And I knew that theoretically, but that flight was the first time it kind of really sunk in. And that, combined with the imposter syndrome, all that stuff I mentioned already, sent me into a few-year-long struggle where I was like, oh, I worked really hard to get to this badass career, and I actually don't deserve to be here or don't belong here. Now what? And so I take people through that whole journey. But that's the teaser version. Mace is an acronym, but
we're gonna have to bring you in to get you to speak so we can hear the story in person. So I love that. That's good marketing right there. That's outstanding. So Michelle, it's been an honor to have you, Michelle Mace Curran, on. Thank you. Honestly, we love it. Everybody's gonna love it. Reach out to Michelle, follow her. If you need her to speak, if you need somebody to help you out and give you perspective and understand it is a journey. That's the strongest thing you said to me today. Is when you're in, and I've never been in charge and had that kind of responsibility y'all have had, but having 10,000 people and you're like, dude, I don't know. Like, I'm going to do the best I can, but I don't know. Like, I don't have the magic. I don't know. Like, this just happened to us. Let me take a second and consult and figure it out, but I don't know. And I'm going to make a mistake. And I think that's the blessing for us. The mistakes we make in life don't have the consequences you're talking about.
Yep.
So let's have some perspective and be appreciative that we can make mistakes and maneuver, and it's not like, that fine line in some of these other professions and service that we deal with. So Michelle, it's been my honor. Thank you for getting on Punch Me in the Face. Everybody, thank you for your time today. Find Michelle. I promise you'll see her at events that I'm working on. I promise you, because we're going to bring you in. We need everybody hear from you. So have an outstanding day. And when life punched you in the face, or you pull too much G, whatever that even means, keep moving and keep getting up. So thank you, Michelle, and thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thanks, Sean.